Hi, I'm Radine. Welcome to Life Sciences. Today we're looking at the topic evolution, and we're going to have a look at speciation. All right, so where did so many different species, and for example on the Galapagos Islands we find that there are 17, well there are 13 confirmed and possibly another 4 or even more different species of finch. And where did they all come from if there was only one ancestral population? All right, so let's have a look at the concepts we're going to have a look at in this topic. So we have a look at speciation, we're also going to look at reproductive isolation and evolution in present times. Okay, so specifically we're going to look at biological concepts. We're going to have a look at the very important terminology, because terminology is important, and very much so is species, the difference between species and population. And then we're going to go on and have a look at geographic speciation and the mechanism that involves actual new species forming. All right, so let's first have a look at the concepts. And here I would just like to stress that it's very important, and especially when we are answering a question based on speciation, we need to know the difference between the concept of a species and a population. They are quite similar. And as we go through the lesson, I will show you why and where we say we need to use either the word species or we're going to use the word population. And that is why it's very important to know the difference. All right, so let's have a look at the first one, and that is species. So a species is a group of organisms, so it would be whatever, plants or animals, and they have similar characteristics. So, there would be some kind of relatedness there, and they are able to interbreed, so that's important. They would be able to then produce fertile, and fertile means that those offspring will be able to produce more offspring. So in other words, they then can continue the species, produce more offspring. Okay, so that's very important. So it's a group of organisms with similar characteristics, and if they interbreed or when they interbreed, they produce fertile offspring. Right, then we have a look at the term population, and population is a group of organisms again. So that's why I say it's difficult. They're very similar, these definitions, so that's why you really need to know them well. So it's also again a group of organisms, and usually these organisms are of the same species, and they are found in the same habitat at the same time. Okay, so we don't say anything about them interbreeding and producing fertile offspring. We just say that they are in the same habitat at the same time, they have similar characteristics, they usually are a group of organisms that are from the same species. Because remember, a species is massive, and a species can be spread all over in very large areas, a large environment, but we'll find smaller groups, and we call those populations. All right, then we're going to have a look at the term biodiversity. And we said earlier is that bio is living, and diversity would be variety of life. And that variety of life is what exists on Earth. So it's what we can find on Earth. And that variety includes plants, animals, fungi, and microorganisms, as well as the communities. Because remember, organisms don't live in isolation. They live in ecosystems, in habitats where they actually interrelate. So they depend on each other for various reasons. And that is what we call biodiversity. All right, then we're going to have a look at cladogram. It's a diagram, so it's one of our evolutionary diagrams. And basically what it does is it represents hypothetical or theoretical relationships between groups of organisms and their common ancestor. So in other words, we can see how related or how common or how many species have a common ancestor, and we look at the evolution as it occurred over time of these organisms. All right, and then the next term we're going to have a look at is extinction. And extinction is very important. It's a very important concept to know, because this is where organisms that have existed on Earth die out. So in other words, they no longer, once they've died out, there are no longer that species or those organisms on Earth. And we know we have extinction events, and we've learned about mass extinctions and things like that, where organisms, and a good example of an extinct group of organisms are the dinosaurs. Okay, so they have become extinct. Right, then we're going to have a look at the term, or at the concept of reproductive isolation, and that has to do with reproduction, obviously, and it's where organisms, so to prevent crossbreeding of species. So in other words, species are not able to interbreed, because usually when species interbreed, they don't produce, because we said that is the concept of species, is they are able to produce fertile offspring. So if we have crossbreeding in species, more often than not, the offspring, if they are able to produce offspring, they are infertile, which doesn't mean that the species will continue. So this is why organisms have reproductive isolating mechanisms that can keep them separate so that they don't crossbreed. All right, so that's so that species breed successfully with related species, okay, and it can be for whatever reason. So they're geographically in the same place, so they need to have an isolating mechanism. They have behavioral patterns, they have physiological, so in other words, they might have display characteristics or even genetic barriers that prevents them from interbreeding. All right, we're going to have a look at the next term, and that is as a result of cross breeding between different species. We have offspring that usually we call them hybrids, because they come from different species, and they usually, very often, the hybrids are infertile. So it's not really a new species, because remember we said the definition of a species is that those organisms must be able to produce fertile offspring. Okay. Okay, so that's all we have time for now. We're going to take a break. Try and stretch your legs, get something to drink, and we'll see you after the break.